I recently made a video that asked, which is better, Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, or Hearts of Iron? And at the beginning of that video, I made this joke. As for Imperator Rome, I mean, do you really need a video asking if Imperator Rome is as good as the others? Really? Okay, I guess. Here goes. Now, aside from the fact that it highlighted how hilarious I am, the joke also prompted a question from user Tabs Forever, hello if you're watching, in which they asked what my thoughts were on how to make Imperator Rome up to the standard of Paradox's other history titles. I will apologise if you found the title of this video a little misleading, and I will clarify that at the time of making this video, there is no Imperator Rome 2. Nor has it even been suggested. This is purely a hypothetical discussion. That being said, I'm Strat Tom, and these are 5 things I want to see in Imperator Rome 2. Number 1. Dynasties, not nations. Imperator Rome, particularly at launch, very much had a feeling of being EU4 with a Roman skin. While I do love EU4, it's not the right model for a game about Rome. In my Imperator Rome 2, you would not choose as a nation to play as. Rather, you would adopt a more Crusader King style of play, choosing a noble dynasty, or more accurately in this setting, a patrician family to play as. And it's not like the developers didn't see that either. There are various families in place during your playthrough in Imperator Rome. The problem is that I don't care about them. Like in EU4, they're numbers on a menu, and I simply have to keep their interests in a sort of balance in order to prevent civil war. Imperator Rome, quite simply, is a map painter with politics being a cursory consideration that feels very tacked on. For me, the most interesting thing about the Roman Republican period is the inner plotting and machinations between rival factions within Rome itself. This absolutely should be the cornerstone of any future Imperator Rome game, taking your family and scheming your way into power. Perhaps you'll be a stern defender of Republican virtue like Cincinnatus, or hatching a Machiavellian plot to take sole control of the Republic like Julius Caesar, or a bit of both like Sulla. These are the stories that need to be told, and this is the gameplay that needs to happen. The risk, of course, is that a Republican system is difficult to make in a game. There needs to be something to do when your character is not in power. Paradox would have to make a deep system that took all aspects of the cursus honorum, the Roman political ladder, into account. Also, a way of managing your own personal wealth and power will need to be included. I think this could be interesting in other culture groups too, outside of Rome. Crusader Kings have already shown us how this can be done for more traditional kingdoms, and I think the idea of forming a tribal confederation would be incredibly interesting, yet difficult, using this system. Number 2. The client-patron model. The client-patron model is a simplistic way of describing how a lot of dealing was done in ancient Rome, and I think that it should be a key facet of any future Imperator Rome game. Essentially, wealthy patricians would have a lot of poorer folk that were reliant on them for handouts in order to make ends meet. The wealthier and more powerful a patron was, the more clients he would have come to visit him every morning. A wily client would get up extra early and perhaps have a few different patrons to go call on, collecting all the money that he needed for the day. These handouts weren't given out of the goodness of their hearts, however. Things were expected of a good client. Whenever Roman patricians went out in public to conduct business or attend legal proceedings, they would have a team of slaves and free men following them, shouting their support. In the Roman world of mob justice, the importance of this can't be understated. A man showing up to court with a much larger entourage was much more a vital factor in his success than any evidence or legal know-how. The dynamic of this would change over the history of the Republic, as what was once just a base of support became small armies that would happily take to violence in defense of their patrons. I think this would be an excellent addition to the game, as it would be a great way of influencing support in your character's favour over the course of the game. The client-patron model would eventually extend to foreign policy too. Smaller city-states and tribes would become client states of Rome, owing their safety and prosperity to the fact that they acknowledged Rome as master. Further than this, sometimes the kings or chiefs of these client states saw themselves more so as a client of a particular patrician family rather than Rome itself. Pompey sought help in Egypt, as it had been his father that set up the Ptolemies as clients of Rome, and led him to think that their allegiance would be to him and not Caesar. Of course, betrayals do happen. I think this model would provide some excellent stories, particularly in less centralised empires like Carthage, a nation that relied heavily on its client states to provide for them militarily. Also, families like the Barcid dynasty would famously set up semi-autonomous kingdoms in Iberia, which paid very little heed to the suffet back in Carthage. Beware though, if you don't play nice with the other kids back in Carthage, they may leave you to flounder in Italy, despite your obvious successes. Number 3. Economic shifts. Managing your economy is a key part of many strategy titles, but I think that a game based on the Roman Republic needs a slightly more nuanced system than trade and tax equals rich. I already talked about the family-based system that I would implement earlier, and because of this, my Imperator Rome 2 would have a public treasury and a personal wealth system in place. Of course, for the player with looser morals, public funds could somehow find their way into your personal treasury. That being said, a certain level of enriching oneself when in a proconsular position was a poorly kept secret, and it happened often. On the other side of the coin, quaestors, a low rung on the cursus honorum who looked after the state treasury, would often put themselves into debt, putting on elaborate games, races and other festivities for the people of Rome. After all, the man who the people fondly remembered for putting on a great show as quaestor would have an easier time getting elected when it was his time to stand for the consulship. One issue with Rome becoming a superpower after the Punic Wars were the problem caused by the influx of wealth. In a normal game, an influx of wealth would be great. However, if we're forced to deal with various greedy patricians, this new wealth could cause conflicts to erupt. It is around this time in history that the old Roman Stoicism starts to slip away in the favour of the hedonistic character that you might typically associate with Rome. The now super rich patricians cemented their wealth by buying up vast tracts of land, left idle by middle class farmers who were being forced to serve in the legions. After returning home, these soldiers couldn't even find work on the land they had been forced to sell, as there was also an influx of slaves pouring into Roman territory. This caused the gap between rich and poor to widen massively, which killed off the era of the Roman farmer soldier, which led to the privately raised professional armies of the late Republican era, which led to the downfall of the Republic and the rise of the Imperium. I'm simplifying a lot there, but it is important to note that the economic shifts within the Republic were a major factor in its ultimate decline, and this is something that needs to be reflected in any future Imperator Rome game. Number 4. Warfare and recruitment. I hinted at the implications on recruitment in the last segment, but there's plenty more to discuss. When Imperator Rome first dropped, most nations had standing armies that could be trained and recruited. In a more recent update, this has been removed in favour of armies that are levied when needed and released from duty when the war is over, much like Crusader Kings. This is more accurate of the time period, but I'd definitely take it one step further. The social wars were a massive conflict in this period, and the conflict stemmed from the rights granted, well, not granted, to Rome's client states. Various states in the Italian peninsula were not given full Roman citizenship, but were still expected to provide troops for Roman legions. For a time, there was a clear distinction between Roman soldiers and Allied soldiers in terms of the rights they had to loot and other benefits. However, the distinction between them on the battlefield grew less and less, and so the Allied states wished to be treated as equals within the Roman system, as full citizens. They would eventually be afforded that citizenship, and I think that one key aspect of recruitment in any future Imperator Rome game should focus on what troops you get and from whom. Rome often supplemented its army with Gallic auxilia from tribes friendly to Rome. In short, in my Imperator Rome 2, diplomacy and military recruitment would forever be joined. Alliances and client state agreements should come with a set number of men promised to the legions. Furthermore, I think training and discipline should be more of a factor. I found that battles in Imperator Rome devolved into the usual paradox standard of, for the most part, the larger army wins. A well-trained, disciplined Roman army should be able to beat a barbarian rabble 3-4 times its size if the conditions are right. Something akin to the veterancy system in Hoi 4 is something that might work, with further buffs for troops trained in certain formations. Number 5. Culture. Lastly, I think that culture should have a much greater impact on your playstyle. I already talked about different formation types in the last section, and I think this should be strongly influenced by culture, the Greek phalanx, the Roman maniple system, etc. But I think how you play the game and what you need to achieve should have some bearing on your culture too. The criteria to achieve the upper status in any given society would change from culture to culture. Prospective consuls in Rome would see their popularity and influence increase tenfold off the back of stunning military victories. As we saw with the likes of Marcus Crassus, being wealthy was advantageous, but it didn't make you beloved. In addition to this, the legacy of your family would be incredibly important. On his way to becoming consul, Gaius Marius had to overcome the huge societal stigma of being novus homo, or a new man, meaning that none of his ancestors had ever held the title of consul, thus showing how important the connection between one's culture, one's family is. And on that note, this means that a playthrough with, say, Carthage would be totally different. In Carthage, personal wealth was a huge factor in how influential you were, and nobody would care if that wealth was generational or newly made. The son of a wealthy man who had since become destitute was a nobody. The son of a beggar who had made his fortune was somebody. This could go further. The Gallic tribes would respect a chief that was a strong and skilled fighter. The Greeks loved themselves a good bloodline and links to past heroes and kings. In Imperator Rome, outside the mission system, which isn't great to begin with, I don't feel that there is a huge difference between playing Rome and Carthage, or Macedonia and the Averni. An improved culture system would see a greater emphasis on replayability, as you would want to see all the different systems and playstyles. Imperator Rome is sadly not a game I find myself coming back to with much regularity, and I really wish that that wasn't the case, because I love ancient Rome as a setting, but the game, for me, simply does not encapsulate the feeling of intrigue and politicking and backstabbing that makes ancient Rome so captivating. It would be impossible to completely replicate it, but I think that these 5 aspects could greatly improve things. There were a few other ideas that I didn't know how to fully flesh out, like perhaps a Mos Maiorum system that slowly breaks down like the world tension system in Hoi 4. I hope you've enjoyed this little thought experiment. If you had any other ideas on how to improve the Imperator Rome system, then I would love to hear them in the comments, alongside any suggestions for future videos like this. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and perhaps go follow me on Twitter too. I've been Strat Tom, and I'll see you next time.